I could make 10 videos this week and still not laugh sufficiently at everything published in the Washington Post just since Sunday. A Monday op-ed argues that cancel culture is actually a feature of freedom, not an enemy of it. If you criticize it, it's just because you have contempt for democracy. Well, yeah, I don't think a mob of 51% is right to ruin the livelihood of someone over disagreement with their joke or opinion. That's why we protect minority and individual rights in this country. If I have contempt for democracy, it's only the same contempt on which our Constitution is built. Of course, upon the killing of al-Baghdadi last weekend, WAPO's headline memorialized him as an austere religious scholar, which is odd. I was told that ISIS has nothing to do with Islam at all. Now the case is that Islam is his primary influence, but he only does that terrorism stuff on the side, part-time, like he's driving for Uber or something. Don't get in that Home Depot truck if it comes to pick you up. Another WAPO op-ed disputes Trump's claim that al-Baghdadi died a coward.
He died like a dog. He died like a coward.
Fact check false. The assertion that he died a coward was contradicted by the fact that he blew himself up, taking 3 children used as human shields with him in that courageous and brave detonation. The claim that al-Baghdadi died like a dog is also false, presumably, because dogs don't die in such scenarios. They survive to let their tongues hang in all their glory, as Trump featured in a meme posted to his Twitter account. And the Washington Post's rigorous fact checkers contacted the meme source at the Daily Wire to confirm that the photo Trump shared was in fact doctored, getting to the bottom of exactly how and why a Medal of Honor recipient was digitally replaced by a dog. The way the Washington Post looks at Trump's memes with a total inability to distinguish between sincerity and trollery, that's exactly how I look at their newspaper. I see their content, I squint, and I think,
you serious?
Still, none of that material adds a twitch to my squint, quite like the understated and actual worst piece of content they published this week, an op-ed from former Time editor and Obama State Department official Richard Stengel. Why America needs a hate speech law. It's one thing to be humorless. It's quite another to put the force of law behind it in a total betrayal of your country's first value. Our author writes, when I was a journalist, I loved Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr.'s assertion that the Constitution and the First Amendment are not just about protecting free thought for those who agree with us, but freedom for the thought that we hate. But as a government official traveling around the world championing the virtues of free speech, I came to see how our First Amendment standard is an outlier. Yes, that's exactly why you were championing it, because it's an outlier. The US is supposed to be a beacon of freedom for the rest of the world, not a student of censorship for the global authorities. Being an outlier relative to Islamic theocrats or Chinese communists is a good thing. Yes, the First Amendment protects the thought that we hate, but it should not protect hateful speech that can cause violence by one group against another. In an age when everyone has a megaphone, that seems like a design flaw. First of all, hateful speech is simply speech that you hate. It's an opinion with which you disagree. Second, if violence is what you're worried about, that's already covered. The Supreme Court has ruled that threats and incitement to violence are not protected by the First Amendment. We don't need a hate speech law to criminalize these things. Those laws are already on the books. As we'll see, though, our author doesn't actually care about violence. That's just a palatable way to frame the censorship of what he's actually worried about, things he disagrees with. It is important to remember that our First Amendment doesn't just protect the good guys. Our foremost liberty also protects any bad actors who hide behind it to weaken our society. In the weeks leading up to the 2016 election, Russia's Internet Research Agency planted false stories, hoping they would go viral. They did. Russian agents assumed fake identities, promulgated false narratives, and spread lies on Twitter and Facebook, all protected by the First Amendment. That's partly because the intellectual underpinning of the First Amendment was engineered for a simpler era. The amendment rests on the notion that the truth will win out in what Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas called the marketplace of ideas. The framers believed that this marketplace was necessary for people to make informed choices in a democracy. Somehow, magically, truth would emerge. The presumption has always been that the marketplace would offer a level playing field, but in the age of social media, that landscape is neither level nor fair. Notice how we've totally shifted away from violence to misinformation as the basis for this supposedly much-needed hate speech law. Under what weird definition of hate speech would Russian Facebook lies fit? Who knows, but that's the point. It's a catch-all term for speech I don't like. And our author's reasoning rests on a fundamental misunderstanding of how the marketplace of ideas works. It is not magic by which the truth emerges when ideas are shared freely to compete. It's a messy process that makes the best of inherent human flaws. The marketplace of ideas as a theory does not assume perfection. In fact, it assumes imperfection. It assumes that any one person is highly likely to make mistakes in consuming information and forming opinions and assessing the truth. Some people may be better than others, but we all make mistakes in separating fact and fiction, and so it's much better for each person to make that judgment individually in a decentralized way, rather than rely on the necessarily flawed judgment of one central authority figure. By decentralizing our mistakes, we mitigate the costs of them and arrive at good information and good judgments more often than not. It's not that free speech always leads to the correct answer. There are often many wrong turns along the way. It's just that it's a hell of a lot better system than simply believing what the authority tells you at gunpoint. And speaking of, it's back to violence we go, since this author has no coherent argument whatsoever. Domestic terrorists, such as Dylan Roof and Omar Mateen and the El Paso shooter, were consumers of hate speech. Speech doesn't pull the trigger, but does anyone seriously doubt that such hateful speech creates a climate where such acts are more likely? Yes, I do doubt that claim. In fact, I think it's totally backward. I think censorship creates a climate where such acts are likely. If you're free to discuss your ideas, no matter how unpopular they may be, you have an outlet for them, and you have an opportunity for others to challenge them freely and non-violently. Perhaps even persuade you against them, maybe change your mind. Take away your freedom to express yourself, and suddenly the only outlet your viewpoints have is violence. Speech didn't pull the trigger, correct? Outside of incitement, speech never does. Speech keeps fingers off of triggers. It's the alternative to violence, not the cause. Our author closes, all speech is not equal, and where truth cannot drive out lies, we must add new guardrails. I'm all for protecting thought that we hate, but not speech that incites hate. It undermines the very values of a fair marketplace of ideas that the First Amendment is designed to protect. What? I thought the marketplace of ideas was a bunk theory. It relies on magic, and it doesn't work in reality because of Russian lies on Facebook. If so, why are we suddenly so worried about protecting it? It always breaks down to things that produce outcomes I like are good, things that produce outcomes I don't like are bad, and sprinkle in some convenient ad hoc philosophy and principles along the way. Even if it's in total contradiction to what I just wrote a few paragraphs ago, doesn't matter, as long as I get my way in the end. But that's the trickiness of liberty. It means nothing if not the liberty of others to exercise it differently from you. It means nothing if not sometimes people do, or God forbid, say things you don't like. It means nothing if not sometimes you don't get your way. Actually, I'm protecting freedom by imposing these modest restrictions on things that undermine it. No, you're not. You are saying that people should only be as free as you allow them to be, in pursuit of the higher value of some collectivist utopia. Talk about things that only work by magic? I have yet to see any magician successfully pull off that trick. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.